I mean, there's so many different type of Jews today. I'm talking about the categories that we know, like Ashkenazim and Sephardim and all these different groups. So, if the Jewish people went to Europe and to Africa and to Yemen and to Iran and everywhere they went, and nowadays you have all these different type of Jews. Not, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are born of a Jewish mother. I'm just saying, how is it that is it possible that there is anyone that's alive today that's not descended from converts?
That's a good question.
Anytime that you see someone claiming to be a Cohen that has very light features, blonde hair and blue eyes, and I know this statement sounds a little superficial, but they gotta have some non-Jewish blood within them.
You can't go from having more melanin to less melanin and at the same time claim some pure Middle Eastern lineage or pedigree. Which means that, yes, you could go from having more melanin to less melanin if you acknowledge that outsiders exist in your line or that you're possibly descended from converts. Now, again, this can't apply to Kohanim because Kohanim are not supposed to marry converts. Now, we see a similar problem with groups like the Black Hebrew Israelites who say that Esav was the first white man. Well, it says in the text that he married women of color, women of African descent. So if he would have started off white, how could he still have remained white? So I think both sides are a bit confused.
That's not the issue. The problem I have is how far people go to deny it. If they didn't fight against it so much, I wouldn't care. But why do they make it? No, we are Middle Eastern. My descendants are like, who gives a crap who your descendants are? Are you keeping Torah? I mean, that's what matters. Why isn't when someone says, and I slightly understand why a Jew would in some way snap at someone who makes a claim that Ashkenazim are descended from the kingdom of Khazaria.
Well, I thought that was already, I mean, isn't that what the Kuzari is about, kind of? Like, I mean, basically, like, what would be the problem if that were true? Like, to me, that's not a problem. If there's some Ashkenazi Jews that came from Khazaria, like, that's not a real problem.
But religiously, I don't see that as a problem. Now, the Kuzari, there's many people who say that didn't really happen because it's
a historical fact, actually.
What?
The kingdom converted to Judaism. The king converted to Judaism, and everyone else converted with him.
I don't know if it's a historical fact. I mean, it appears in the book.
They did it political. I mean, obviously it was political because they were squished in between the Byzantine Christians and the Muslims on the south. So it kind of makes sense that they would go with Judaism. But I'm pretty sure that's historical fact. Yeah,
no, it's not historical. Trust me, if it was historical, there wouldn't be any debate amongst Israelis. Went as so far as to make scientific tests proving that Ashkenazim didn't descend from that region. Well, there was this book by Arthur Koestler called The 13th Tribe. He brings that many artifact, but it's still, many people debate it. I think it makes sense, but that's not the only example of a kingdom converting, or the king converting, like of a kingdom and the whole nation converting.
Right. I mean, Yemen said to.
Right. In Yemen, also in that region near Persia, there was the kingdom of Adib that the king converted and everyone else converted as well. I heard Burl Wine mention that in a class once. There's many of these things that people don't speak about. I have no issue believing that the kingdom of Khazaria existed and they converted to Judaism and this and that, and they became at least partially the Ashkenazim. I have no problem with that. The problem I have is when Jews fight tooth and nail to say that that's not possible. That you have someone with very, very clear European features claiming to be a direct descendant of Moses. And I don't know why they would fight. Like, who cares if you're a convert or not, unless you have a problem with converts. And that's typically the issue.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what my question is like, because I don't want to take away the fact that there is an ethnic component to the Jewish people. I mean, that should be without question, I think. But it's like, at some point, if you have Jews of European descent and Jews of Arab descent and Jews of African descent and Jews of
I don't think there's an ethnic component. There's a genetic component initially. Right. Ethnic is anything. It's like cultural.
Right. All I'm saying is that you have Jews from everywhere on the globe, and they're clearly descended from these people. Like, they look like Arabs, they look like Asians, they look like Europeans, and it's not to say that they're not Jewish. I'm just saying that what would be the issue of saying, yeah, there's a good chance that we converts. It doesn't matter. We accept converts in the tradition.
If there wasn't a stigma against converts, but there is. As much as they say, "Oh, converts are like the apple of God's eye," and that's all nonsense. Like if that was true, like you'd want to see more converts, and that make it hard for them.
Could the problem be that maybe they're afraid of losing their Jewish status?
That is definitely the main issue, but that's not justified in Torah. To care about your genetic gene pool, like who gives a crap that what are Jews known for? If I say anything, I'm going to sound anti-Semitic. What's their Jewish identity? What?
Money.
Let's
just say it. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, right? You might as well just say it. I mean, they did invent banking and checks and all the other monetary things.
I don't think Jews invented banking. Yeah, I mean,
of course, it started with the in Venice. No, the merchants.
Well, lending money and banking are not necessarily the same thing.
Okay.
Are you thinking of Merchant of Venice? No, I'm getting confused there. But anyway, someone asked in the chat here, like, can we have corn tortillas during Pesach? Yes, you could have corn tortillas during Pesach. However, you have to make sure that there isn't anything else in that tortilla, because I've seen them in the local market and they have a hashkacha on it. For sure, they don't say kosher lePesach, but that doesn't mean that it's not kosher lePesach. For some reason, at least in America, kosher lePesach means kosher lePesach according to Ashkenazim. So this is why if you go to any supermarket, or at least in a Jewish community, they'll sell you the Coca-Colas with like a yellow cap on it.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, oh, these Coca-Colas are made with real sugar. And they don't mention that that's only an issue for people who don't eat kitniyot. Because corn, which is corn syrup, which is the only thing that would not make Coca-Cola kosher lePesach for Ashkenazim, is allowed for everyone else.
That's a good point.
But
I mean, the whole point of a hechsher is modern day. I mean, how old is having a symbol on your food? Maybe like what, 30 years old?
Maybe
not even that. You know?
Yeah, no, probably.
And most world doesn't even have that. I mean, if you go to the supermarket in Europe or any place else in the world, you're not gonna. I mean, it's silly. I mean, obviously, if you go shopping, shouldn't the logical thing to do, Rav, is to look at the ingredients? Okay, I pick up the corn. It says corn.
Sense.
Okay, makes sense, right? Okay, I pick up the ketchup bottle. It says tomatoes, sugar, blah blah blah. Okay, these are kosher items. Wouldn't that be the logical way?
That makes sense.
But this is the problem. I've heard though, Rav, they say, well, maybe it's made in a factory with goyim eating pork or something. I don't know. They make up so many excuses. Does that matter at the end of the day, whether or not it's made in a factory alongside, let's say, bacon? Would it make a difference if they were processing bacon in the same compound, the same factory as, let's say, the ketchup bottles?
It depends on the food that's being processed, especially if it falls into the category of what's called ola l'shochal malachim, food that would be served on top of a king's table. Then it wouldn't have the issue of being cooked by Gentiles. But if it's standard food, like something that royalty wouldn't eat, which I'm not even sure what royalty eats anymore. Donald Trump eats Kentucky Fried Chicken.
It's true, McDonald's.
But I've heard rabbis question this whole thing, and there's many rabbis who are more open-minded who say, yes, just look at the ingredients. And they usually get thrown under the bus by the more totalitarian rabbis. But
let's be honest, it's a racket, right? I mean, the people that give out the OU certification, Triangle K. Oh, I know, we're not supposed to say Triangle K, Star K, all this OK. I mean, they really just want you to buy the certificate stamps, right? That's really what
it's a form of extortion. Like you said, the whole notion of having a hechsher is something new. 80 years ago, people looked at ingredients. Why is that not good enough today? I'll tell you, I've had enough discussions with rabbis on the air to know how they'll respond. They'll be like, well, this is what the Jewish people have adopted nowadays. And if you do anything different, then you're going against the majority. First of all, there's no commandment to go against the majority when they're doing something that is not found in Torah. In other words, if they're doing something that's desecrating the Torah, it doesn't matter how many people are doing it. It says that there's no honor for your Rav. If he's wearing shatnez in front of everyone, you have a right to tear it from his garment in front of everyone. There's no honor given to people when they're violating Torah. Now, how is someone violating Torah? By making food impossible to acquire as a Torah-keeping individual. How? Because there's people who live in Oklahoma, there's people who live in Tennessee who can't shop in kosher markets because they don't exist, and you're basically telling them to just eat peanut butter, because that's what these guys do. When the mashaliks come, the guys from Israel who you see them more in religious communities, you'll see them in the morning there after you daven asking for money for a school in Israel, and they'll have like a piece of paper, this and that. If you look at their suitcase, all they'll have is peanut butter to eat, because they don't trust any hashgacha, and they're like, if it's not something they recognize, they'll just eat peanut butter the whole trip. And this is already stupid. This is another example where people have departed against what the law actually teaches. The law doesn't say to be so strict. We have to take a step back. When you're making Judaism impossible to live, it's like nowadays, I was talking to a guy today, because I made a video about making pasta during Pesach. Like some guy writes a comment on that post on Facebook. He's like, oh, well, that's a fattening food anyway. You shouldn't be advertising it. It's like, it's never going to be good enough for these people. Pesach's not supposed to be like Yom Kippur, where you're supposed to.
The guy that keeps bashing you.
Yeah, no, but there's a few guys like that. But on Yom Kippur, you're supposed to afflict yourself. Pesach's supposed to be a joyful time. You're not supposed to be like, I mean, if you're Chabad, for sure, because you don't eat gebraks, you can't even have matzo ball soup, anything. It's like, it sucks. It's so depressing. We are our biggest enemy.
Yeah.
Judaism's not hard, man. I'll tell you. I mean, keeping kosher is not hard. Pesach's not hard. Chol Hamoed is not hard. It's people make it hard.